So hi everybody, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about cyber resilience and 5 tips from some of our new research that we just unveiled yesterday here at RSA. My name is Teresa Lanowitz and I'm Chief Evangelist for ATT Cybersecurity and Agent of Level Blue. More about Level Blue in a couple of minutes, but I do want to acknowledge some of my awesome Level Blue colleagues here in the audience with me. We have John, Matt, Dora, Mary, Michelle, Danny, a bunch of Level Blue people here. So after the session's over, if you have any questions about who we are, what we do, we'll all be happy to take questions from you. So first, our disclaimer. Now, how can you apply this learning that we're going to talk about today? This is a chance for you as cybersecurity professionals to be able to influence your organization at the top level, to be able to take this information back and say, look, here's what we've been telling you all along. Here's data to back up what we've been saying. And you're able to go back, have that conversation with your leaders, have that conversation with your C-suite, and make your organization far more cyber resilient. We're going to understand what those barriers are to cyber resilience and find and formalize a definition for cyber resilience. We'll take a look at what organizations are doing with respect to trade-offs between innovation and risk. What do they value more, innovation or risk? And then how to align cybersecurity with business level issues. We've been talking about this for quite some time, that cybersecurity is not a technical issue. It is a business requirement. And we have data to show that we still have a lot of work to do. So next week, you should be able to go back to your organizations and ask your organization, do we have a formalized incident response plan? That's a pretty binary answer, yes or no. And you should be able to go back and find that out next week. And then what attacks are your organization most concerned about? What are you planning for? What are you best handled to remediate? And then understand the preparedness level of those attack types that you're most concerned with. And then within the first 3 months, so by August of this year, you should be able to understand what your organization is doing to address cyber resilience. And then understand what plans you're putting into place to address cyber resilience, if any. And if you're not, then you still have more work to do in the next 6 months. So by the end of the year, by the time November rolls around, you should have a roadmap into making cyber resilience a corporate-wide, a whole company initiative, not just something that a select few in the cybersecurity team is worried about. You want to have a plan for aligning cybersecurity with the business and also understanding what those triggers are that are going to unlock cybersecurity spending for you and how to make sure that cybersecurity is not reactive, but rather proactive and intentional. And then figure out how to engage with trusted advisors. This innovation that we're seeing is happening very, very quickly. We're soon to outpace Moore's Law on it. So how do you really go and interact with these trusted advisors to help you on that journey? So let's get started. Today we're going to take a look at data from our Level Blue Futures Report, Cyber Resilience. Now, the name Level Blue might be new to some of you. So who is Level Blue? We are all Level Blue, and here I mentioned my awesome colleagues up here. We also have Mark standing at the back with copies of the report if you would like one on your way out. So Level Blue was announced on Monday here at RSA. Level Blue is a strategic extension of your team, and we offer you a way to protect your business intelligence through our cybersecurity consulting services. We offer you a way to predict your security investments through our managed security services, and a way to have visibility into your organization so that you can mitigate risk and foster innovation through our threat intelligence teams. And Level Blue is an alliance between AT&T and Wilgem Ventures. We are that strategic extension of your team. So if you have any questions about Level Blue, we're happy to answer them at the end of the session. And as I mentioned, we have a number of people here from Level Blue as well. So welcome to Level Blue. Visit us at levelblue.com. So why is this research so important? We announced this research yesterday, and the data is hot off the press. We just concluded gathering the data in March, so the end of March. This is brand new. Why is this so important? It is important because it's going to give you a way to talk to your leadership inside of your organization about business needs and how we as cybersecurity professionals can help you with that. So this research, I mentioned the data is brand new. We just finished collecting it at the end of March. We went out, we did a quantitative survey of 1,050 professionals in IT and cybersecurity in 18 different countries and 7 different vertical markets. And the cybersecurity and IT professionals that we surveyed were C-suite and C-suite -1. So they're the people at the top who are making the decisions. They're the economic buyers. They're the people inside of your organization who are saying, yes, you can have budget, or no, you cannot have budget, or justify this for me, or don't justify this for me. So those are the people we surveyed. This is who is giving us this data. And what you can watch for over the next 6-7 months is we'll be releasing vertical reports. So all those 7 vertical industries that we surveyed, energy and utilities, finance, healthcare, retail, manufacturing, transportation, U.S. SLED, which is state, local, and higher education, we're going to be releasing individual reports on those. So we were able to glean enough data from these 1,050 survey participants about each of those vertical markets as well. So you heard me say the word cyber resilience a couple of times. So for a level set, for the purpose of this presentation, and when you're reading this report, what I want to be able to do is make sure that these terms are something that are familiar to us. So let's start with cyber resilience. Cyber resilience is looking at the whole IT estate and how that IT estate recovers from certainly a cyber attack, but also a natural disaster, a fire, a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, as well as a man-made accident, and how that organization copes with those disasters and how it copes while it's recovering and restoring business to normal practice. This is about how the business responds to those events. Cybersecurity resilience is looking at the cybersecurity estate, those cybersecurity controls that we're putting in place to help remediate against attack, to help defend against attacks, and so on. And then dynamic computing, and when you read this report, you'll see we referred to it in the questions as boundaryless. It's the idea of innovation beyond the 4 walls of your organization, moving beyond the perimeter. We know that perimeter has been dissolved for a number of years, but we're now seeing a lot of innovation with dynamic computing. So that's the level set on those terms. And you might say, well, a little bit kind of not sure about cyber resilience versus cybersecurity resilience. So let me give you a pretty easy example. So let's say you have a river. Along that riverbank, you have a series of sensors that when the water rises on that riverbank, reaches a certain level, those sensors are going to go off. And it's going to trigger some response for people in the area to evacuate, for emergency medical teams to come in, for a series of other things. So let's say there's an adversary out there. The adversary sees those sensors, identifies them on somebody's network, and says, aha, I can break into those. I can execute a DDoS attack. Take down those sensors, just start running all that traffic through there. That is part of the cybersecurity resilience. That's part of the cybersecurity estate, because the cybersecurity team now has to be able to go and defend against that DDoS attack. Now let's say you have that same scenario, the river with the sensors, and there's a hurricane that comes through. The hurricane comes through, damages all the sensors, takes down the poles that all the sensors are on, and causes a whole host of problems. Now that is a cyber resilience problem. How does the organization recover from? How does the organization continue to operate and cope with that disaster while the IT team gets everything back together? The cybersecurity team might have to play a part in this. Maybe the product team, maybe the marketing team, maybe the legal team. There's a supply chain that you're dealing with, possibly with apps that may have been set up to say, when water reaches a certain level, send notifications to this series of people about evacuating. That is cyber resilience. It's about how the whole organization responds and how the whole organization copes with bringing that part of the business back in the event of a cyber attack, a natural disaster, or some other type of man-made accident. And then when we're talking about innovation, we're looking at dynamic computing. So that's how we're going to use those terms. So this story in this research, it's organized in 4 key areas. We took a look at the big picture. cyber resilience. What are the barriers to cyber resilience? What are people thinking about cyber resilience? We then said, next step down, cybersecurity resilience. What's going on with cybersecurity teams? What types of problems are they encountering? What are the good things that are happening with cybersecurity teams? How can these cybersecurity teams work to eliminate constraints and be more integrated with the business decisions, and align with business? And then we said we wanted to take a look at business agility. What's going on in terms of the investments? How are the investments being made in cybersecurity? How are the investments being made in business? And then what's next? And I promise you, we will not go through this entire presentation without talking about AI, because what's next? Everybody knows AI is one of the things that's what's next. But we'll also take a look at what's going on with cloud, what's going on with the supply chain, what's going on with security spending, and so on. So let's jump into the data. One of the big key findings we found is that 74% of our survey participants said that computing innovation outweighs the corresponding cybersecurity risk. So there's more of an appetite for innovation and less concerned about risk. But we all know when we innovate, we're all being asked to manage that risk. So here we are at a security conference, and our survey participants are saying, we care more about innovation than risk. So how do we balance this? And this is where cyber resilience comes into play. So let's take a look at some of these barriers to cyber resilience. Now what we found, as I said, we surveyed 7 different verticals. Those 7 different verticals are identifying the same cyber resilience barriers. So we were shocked by this, that there wasn't one that stood out in particular verticals. So across the board, everybody's experiencing this same thing. So it starts at the top. The executive leadership does not prioritize cyber resilience. The executive leadership is not thinking about that entire IT estate. And when I say the IT estate, it is everything that we have in our organizations. So mainframes, client server, web, mobile, cloud, custom apps, commercial off-the-shelf apps, old types of networks, 4G networks, 5G networks, IoT devices, cameras, sensors, everything that we have put into that IT estate over the past several years, or probably the past several decades is more accurate, and nothing ever goes away. I was talking to somebody at dinner last night who told me he was a CISO for a very large bank. Everybody would recognize the name. And he was telling me some of the tools that they still had in their inventory at the bank. And they were tools that I worked on earlier in my career back in the mid-90s. So, you know, we have a lot of stuff out there, and that is the IT estate that is so unwieldy. So executives don't prioritize cyber resilience. There's a lack of clarity about where it should reside. Who should own this thing called cyber resilience? And we have all of these new regulations coming out, and some of the data, some of the information that we're told that we have to get for these regulations, it's unattainable, it's unachievable at this time. We can go get it manually, spend a lot of money to go get it manually, but there's not a lot of automation around it. And cyber resilience is not a whole organization priority. So this is something that maybe some people in the organization, you, care about, maybe some people in the IT realm care about it, but it's not a whole organization priority. It's not something that product, line of business, legal, finance, not everybody cares about it. And there's also this idea of saying, well, we're funding cybersecurity, we're funding all of you, we don't have to worry about cyber resilience. But this is the denouement, the conclusion to this. 72% of our survey participants say that governance teams, the people who are responsible for setting up the way our businesses run, those governance teams do not understand cyber resilience. So this is a big, big part of it. So inside of your own organizations, figure out who understands cyber resilience. Who are the governance people? Are they conflating cyber resilience with cybersecurity? Take this data, take this report, and talk to them and start to figure out what cyber resilience means in your organization. So now we bring in this idea of innovation. So we know there are barriers to cyber resilience, but yet we're going to keep innovating. And we're continuing to innovate because innovation brings a lot of positives. So you can access a more sophisticated supply chain. 66% of our survey participants say if we can innovate, if we can bring in new types of projects, we're going to have better access to our supply chain, our physical supply chain, as well as our software supply chain. And we have to start thinking about the supply chain from those two points of view. The physical supply chain, if we're a manufacturing company, we're manufacturing widgets. If we are moving something along through transportation, if we're bringing something into our organization from somebody else, that's the physical supply chain. But also the software supply chain. Where are you getting your software? What does your software bill of materials look like? So this innovation is giving really good access to a more sophisticated supply chain. 79% says it's an ability to develop or fine-tune their AI strategy. It's great. Innovation is going to drive AI. That's exactly what we thought. You can involve cybersecurity earlier. 79% say that we can bring cybersecurity in earlier, hopefully at the strategy and planning phase, while the requirements are being made, not at the development time, not after the fact. But they're saying we want to bring cybersecurity in earlier. And we can maximize our resources. 82% say that that's what this innovation gives them. And 86% say that it improves revenues and operational performance. So innovation is marvelous. From a business perspective, this innovation, these new types of use cases. So think about things such as robots in a manufacturing situation. Think about a manufacturing environment with a series of cameras and sensors watching products being made along the way, and when a defect occurs, you can stop the assembly line at the point of insertion of the defect, minimizing the amount of recalls that you might have on your products. Those are great business optimizers, and it's going to improve revenue because you're scrapping less, you have less products going to market with defects. So think about things from a healthcare perspective. Remote wearables, so remote patient monitoring. After surgery, being able to just identify a patient's vitals so that a surgeon can keep progress tabs on their patient. Things such as cashierless checkout. So all of these use cases, all of these things that we're seeing on a daily basis, that's enabled by a lot of these new technologies, certainly IoT, 5G networks, edge computing use cases, cloud. This is all innovation. And so people are getting really, really positive results from this. But what they also tell us is that 85% of our survey participants said that innovation increases their exposure to risk. But remember the stat I started with that said that 74% of our survey participants said that innovation outweighs risk. So what does this tell us? As cybersecurity professionals, what does this tell us? It brings a lot of uncertainty. So once we start to innovate in our organizations, we start to see uncertainty. These stats, to me, are incredibly powerful. 79% say that because of innovation, our organization must accept some uncertainty when it comes to cyber threats. So that's saying you can no longer say we are going to be impenetrable. We're going to have some uncertainty. 80% say that innovation causes things to be so unwieldy that they have to struggle to make trade-offs with the cybersecurity controls they're going to implement. Think about that. So they're saying, yes, we're bringing in all this innovation. Maybe what we did in the past isn't necessarily the right things, but we're not exactly sure what the right cybersecurity controls are. And our research that we did in 2023 showed that the more innovative use cases that are out there, the number of cybersecurity controls increases as well. So people say, yes, we have to do more. The more innovation we have, the more we have to increase our cybersecurity controls. And this one is something that's, I think, very sobering. 77% say that it's impossible to assess how an attack might impact my organization. So think about this. You are asked by your CISO, by your CEO, by your CFO, how's an attack going to impact my organization? What is it going to do to my business? 77% say, we don't know. It's impossible to assess that because innovation is happening so fast, and there are a lot of problems on the cybersecurity side that we'll get into. But this idea of not knowing how an attack is going to impact your organization is something that we have to see changed. 2 years ago in our research, what we found out is people said, yes, we understand that if there is a cyber attack, it will impact the business. So that's awesome because they recognize that first point, that a cyber attack is going to impact the business. But now 77% are saying it's impossible to determine how an attack is going to impact my business. So there's that uncertainty. So what can you do to help yourself along this path of being more cyber resilient? Identify those barriers. What are the barriers in your organization? Who understands what cyber resilience is? Who can you work with to make cyber resilience a priority? Look internally for some of those answers, but also look externally. Look for those trusted third-party advisors that can come along and help you on that journey to cyber resiliency. And kick off a team meeting with executives. Maybe make it once a week, once a month at first, to just talk about these cyber resilience concerns. So now let's take a look at cybersecurity resilience and some of the barriers to cybersecurity. And for as much as we have all done in this room over the past 2 decades, cybersecurity is still siloed, overlooked, and underfunded. But I'm sure you all know that because you're working in it day to day. And you're doing everything you possibly can to make sure that your organization is protected as well as possible. But cybersecurity, because one of the things that happened during the pandemic is cybersecurity went from being this technical problem with a few smart people sitting in a SOC somewhere looking at logs saying, hey, here's the problem, to being a business requirement. And we have talked about that for the past 4 years. But cyber is still living in a silo. It's still underfunded, and it's often still overlooked. These are the barriers to cybersecurity resiliency. These are the barriers that we're all concerned with. Digital transformation. Digital transformation was the rallying cry in 2020. We all said, yes, we're going to do more digital transformation. But digital transformation 4 years on is incomplete. And there are unintended consequences of digital transformation that are causing problems inside of our organization. And we have talked ad nauseum for the past decade or so about big data, unstructured data, structured data, how we need more metrics, how we need more reporting. 69% of our survey participants say that there is limited use of the reporting, the metrics, and the analytics that they have. The data's sitting there, but only 31% are actually using that data. That's a very low number. So we have to do a better job at making those metrics tell a better story for us. Limited budget for cybersecurity. So 68% of our survey participants say there's limited budget for cybersecurity. And I'll show you what causes the purse strings to be unlocked for cybersecurity budgets a little bit later on. 66% say cybersecurity is an afterthought. Think about this. For the past 2 years in my predictions blog that I write on the cybersecurity, ATT cybersecurity blog, now the Level 2 blog, for the past 2 years in my predictions report, I've been saying application security, data security. This is the year for application security. We've heard a lot of talk about the latest portmanteau of DevSecOps. We go to the show floor, we see a lot of vendors offering DevSecOps solutions. But cybersecurity is still an afterthought. Think about it. We live in the API economy. We see more and more APIs coming out. Those APIs have to be protected. You look at the OWASP top 10 for applications and the OWASP top 10 for APIs. Cross-site scripting and SQL injection are still 2 of the top 10 for OWASP. So cross-site scripting and SQL injection should have been eradicated 10 years ago, but they are still at the top of the list in the OWASP. That shows that cybersecurity is still an afterthought. And as requirements and regulations are saying we have to have and we have to show our software bill of materials, this becomes critical. Cybersecurity can't be an afterthought. Your SBOM, your software bill of materials, has to show where that software is coming from. If it is open source, what repository did you get it from? You have to show that in the SBOM. So you have to be more diligent. Cybersecurity has to be integrated up front. And then cybersecurity is still siloed, 64%. 64% of our survey respondents say that cybersecurity is still very much a siloed activity and a siloed group. And that couples quite nicely with saying that cybersecurity is an afterthought. 66% say cybersecurity is an afterthought. 67% say that cybersecurity is reactive and transactional versus being proactive and intentional. This is problematic, that 67% of people are saying cybersecurity is still a very reactive activity. And I'll show you those triggers that cause those reactions. Think about this. 65% say that they do not have a formalized incident response plan. Let me phrase that the other way. Only 35% say they have a formalized incident response plan. So ask yourselves, you can be honest with yourself because nobody's looking, do you have a formalized incident response plan in your organization? If you do, is it more than just a template inside of a word processing doc? Or is it really a plan of action? And if you don't have that, think about how you can really get that inside your organization. Cybersecurity is not included in computing planning. 60% say that cybersecurity, we go off, we plan all this innovation, but we don't include the cybersecurity team. Projects do not have a cybersecurity line item budget. 59% of projects do not have a cybersecurity line item budget. And as I said, we've been talking about making cybersecurity a priority over the past 4 years. And cybersecurity is not included during corporate strategy discussions. That's a big number. 54% do not have cybersecurity included. And then we don't have standardized cybersecurity processes, 53%. But the fact that 67% say cybersecurity is still reactive is problematic. So what can you do to make cybersecurity more proactive? Remove those constraints. Work and collaborate with your other stakeholders. Again, start with identifying those barriers. Do we have an incident response plan? Are we including a line item for cybersecurity in every project? Is cybersecurity included in top-level computing innovation discussions? If the answer is no, figure out how you can get in front of the right people and show them this data, that it's still very reactive. Look internally and externally again. Bring in those trusted third-party advisors. Look at things such as, what does my SBOM, what does my software bill of materials look like? Is it something that the cybersecurity team can sign off on and say, yeah, your SBOM, your software bill of materials, that supply chain where you're getting your software, it's solid, it's not going to cause a problem. You have to look at those third-party supply chains as well as any other supply chain that you're using to bring in software inside of your own organization. And then establish those metrics and milestones. 69% are not using the metrics that are out there. So make sure you're using the data that you have available and make that data meaningful. So now let's talk a little bit about business agility. We talked about cyber resilience, what some of the constraints are for cybersecurity. Now let's take a look at what's going on with a business agility perspective, where we say we want to align our cybersecurity investment with our business initiatives to make sure that we are coalescing and coming together to make our business more agile. So year over year, between 2023 and 2024, we asked this same question in 2023. We wanted to find out where organizations are allocating their overall project funding. You can see that security spending increased year over year 11%. And last year, security was at 22%. This year, it's at 33%. Last year, network was at 19%. This year, it's at 30%. So that's pretty much where most of the changing altered. We still see overall strategy and planning about the same, applications about the same. So if you look at this, think about what happened over the past 4 years. People were setting up servers anywhere and everywhere. They were VPNing in from devices that weren't owned by the organization. they didn't have a whole lot of cybersecurity processes in place. So the network problem, we had developers setting up servers. The networking problem is now pretty much under control. So they've taken some of that money and they've said, we want to allocate this to cybersecurity because we want to get cybersecurity under control as well. However, the problem is that these external triggers, again, these very reactive triggers, these very transactional triggers, unlock money for cybersecurity. So new compliance conditions, we all have to deal with compliance. When new compliance comes out, cybersecurity gets some budget. A competitor is breached, cybersecurity gets some budget. There's a breach in your own organization, suddenly there's unlimited funding, open checkbooks, buy whatever you need, do whatever you need to do. And that is still very reactive. Cyber insurance requirements are triggering spending on cybersecurity. But again, that's reactive. That's not thinking about the whole business and the whole organization. And then significant business computing failure, and then a supply chain dependency. And we're going to see more and more about supply chain dependencies and supply chain needs for cybersecurity in the coming months. We're going to see a lot of reactive things occur. We're going to see a lot of organizations say, yes, we need to implement multi-factor authentication because we never had it before. That is a very reactive thing based upon a high-profile breach. Those are all reactive. We want cybersecurity to be proactive and intentional. And what we also found is that bringing in these trusted third-party advisors, cybersecurity consultants, managed security services, global systems integrators, telcos to help you on your networking journey. It's important that organizations bring in these trusted third-party advisors because this is all new. All this innovation is new. We're no longer writing accounts payable, accounts receivable applications that are sitting inside the four walls of our organization. We're well outside the four walls of our organization. We have moisture sensors sitting on tractors in cornfields in Iowa. We have sensors sitting on manufacturing floors in Detroit. We have all of these different devices, all of these different computing pieces of power that are out there that we need to make sure are secured as best we can, and we need to understand them and understand our attack surface. So in terms of bringing in outside expertise, what we find is that the more strategic activities, strategy and planning, architecture, data management, they're bringing in these more trusted advisors earlier in the life cycle. And as we all know, from an engineering perspective, the more we spend on the strategy, the more we spend on the requirements, the easier and the less it's going to cost us to do things such as develop the application, provide good quality assurance, make sure that we're doing these things such as regulation and compliance. And this stat stood out to us. 32% of our survey participants said that they are strategically delegating responsibility by bringing in cybersecurity as a service. And cybersecurity as a service, another as a service, CSAAS, so cybersecurity as a service is something that we're going to be hearing a lot about in the coming months, in the coming years, because cybersecurity as a service brings in that totality and starts to look at things such as cyber resilience, cybersecurity barriers, and how this pertains to business agility. So cybersecurity as a service can help you get there. So what do we want to do? We want to remove those silos. And as cybersecurity professionals, we all know we want those silos to be eradicated as quickly as possible. We want to talk to our leaders, talk to our C-suite executives about the importance of cybersecurity early in the life cycle, during the requirements phase, during the planning and strategy phase, and then establish good metrics and milestones that are going to say, yes, we are far more resilient from a cyber resilience perspective as well as from a cybersecurity perspective than we were 6 months ago or a year ago. Now looking ahead, where are we going next? Of course, one of the things we always want to know is what type of attacks do people think are going to impact their organization? Last year, in 2023, our research came back and said that people were most concerned about DDoS attacks. And what did we see in 2023? We saw a lot of DDoS attacks. Now this year, in 2024, our survey is showing people were most concerned about ransomware, followed very closely by business email compromise, then to personal information exfiltration, phishing, insider threat, account takeover, DDoS attacks, and nation-state attacks. So DDoS attacks move from number 1 down to number 7 for 2024. What we also notice here is these social engineering types of attacks have been in the news lately, and people were far more concerned about these social engineering attacks. But the one piece of data that stood out for us when thinking about the types of attacks that organizations are going to withstand or have to remediate against is they said, we're pretty good at thinking we know how to remediate for everything but DDoS and nation-state attacks. So DDoS attacks, a good old-fashioned DDoS attack, organizations are not prepared to remediate against a DDoS attack. So that's very telling. And if you read the report, we go into a little bit of the analysis on why that's actually happening. And then looking ahead with the supply chain and infrastructure. Supply chain, 59% have poor visibility into their supply chain. And this is the physical supply chain as well as the software supply chain. And some of the attacks that we have seen recently on the supply chain, on the software supply chain, would indicate that that is exactly true. There's not a whole lot of visibility into the software supply chain, and that's why those SBOMs are so important. So do what you can to understand your supply chain. Your physical supply chain, understanding what cybersecurity controls they're implementing, understanding what they think their biggest risks are, understanding what types of attacks they may have been had to remediate against, and so on. And then infrastructure ownership. People are moving to the cloud. I don't think that's a big surprise. I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody in here. Right now, though, 61% of our survey participants said, we are on-premise right now, but we are moving to the cloud because we think the cloud helps us with a lot of our cybersecurity resilience. And we all know there are problems there in thinking that the cloud is going to do all of your cybersecurity for you. You still have to make sure you're handling cybersecurity on your own, in your own organization. And then AI. With all the talk about AI, you would think that we were all going to be replaced by some sort of super smart robot tomorrow. 61% of our survey participants said, we're implementing AI, but we're doing it slowly. We are going to be intentional about it. And what they also told us is a lot of our cybersecurity solutions already use some type of artificial intelligence, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. And our own solutions, our own threat intelligence unit, we've been using machine learning and artificial intelligence for over the past decade. So artificial intelligence is one of those enablers. And this was asked specifically about your cybersecurity solutions, where you are in cybersecurity. And we said, where are you in terms of artificial intelligence implementation, that category of artificial intelligence? And that includes generative AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. From a cybersecurity perspective, only 15% said they are using generative AI. What we also found out is they said in things such as demand gen emails, marketing campaigns, letter writing, that sort of thing, they're using generative AI, but for cybersecurity, they're not using generative AI that much. They are primarily using artificial intelligence, so think smart robots, remote process automation, bringing in things from those large language models at the very basic level. They're 26% at machine learning, and only 21% even starting to really think about deep learning, more on the predictive side versus pattern matching. So that's where our research says that AI is and where we're looking ahead with it. So how can you focus on cyber resilience inside of your own organization? Identify those barriers. Remember, 72% of our survey participants said governance teams do not know what cyber resilience is. Be secure by design. Bring cybersecurity in as early as possible. Bring cybersecurity in during the requirements, the planning, the strategy phase. Don't wait until the development phase, because by that time your architecture is already baked, your architecture is already set, and all you're doing is bolting cybersecurity on. Be proactive. You want to lessen rework. Then align cyber investments with the business. Understand what your business goals are and align your cyber investments so that the business and cyber are speaking the same language, so that we don't have these reactive types of situations. Remember, 64% said cybersecurity is still reactive. Those external triggers are unlocking budgets for us. We want to make sure we're proactive and intentional with what we're doing. Build a support ecosystem. Bring in those trusted third-party advisors. There are people out there who have done this time and time again. This is all very new, but you have consultants, managed security service providers. They have done this before. They have seen this. So capitalize on that deep technical knowledge that they have. Capitalize on that information that they have. Bring in that trusted third-party advisor to work with, because what you want to do is maximize your revenues. You want to be able to optimize the efficiency of your organization. And then transform your cybersecurity. Be aligned with the business. Don't be a silo. Say you want a seat at that table, and make sure that you are going for that seat at the table. And if you do these first 4 things, that 5th thing will fall in line for you. So I want to encourage everybody to take a copy of the report. My awesome colleague Mark is standing in the back with a box of them. Take a copy. Take a copy for your leadership, your C-suite. Mark it up. Have the conversations with them about where you want to go to be more cyber resilient. Include cyber resilience in your organization. And we invite you to join us at levelblue.com. And during this transition phase, you can get the report at cybersecurity.att.com/futures report. Or if you go to levelblue.com, it's available there as well. And if you don't grab a copy from Mark, you can come by our booth and pick one up as well. So, any questions? And if you have a question, if you can please come to the mic. Yeah, thanks.
First of all, thank you. Looking forward to reading this report, but fundamentally speaking, resilience and BCP-DR, how would you want to differentiate them, largely because they kind of sit in the same contours?
Between resilience and
BCP and DR, especially DR, disaster recovery, business continuity.
I'm not getting the part of the question. Can you help me out?
Which is
okay.
kind of the same realm in the context of resilience.
Part of business continuity disaster recovery. It is certainly part of it. So a good business continuity disaster recovery plan includes cyber resilience, because business continuity is looking at things such as your buildings, for example. How do you continue with your buildings? But what cyber resilience says is, how do we handle keeping our business up and running, our digital business up and running, during those big catastrophic types of events? A cyber attack, a natural disaster, a man-made event.
And in the context of, there are a couple of things. There's one more.
That's okay.
In the context of the attack vectors and the most probable sources of where resilience may be going wrong.
We asked about the types of attacks that they're most concerned about.
So ransomware was there, which is, I think, the most obvious. And then account takeovers were there, which is more like an IT identity management problem. Though, yes, I understand it's connected to resilience, but how are, in your research, some of those trends showing up, or how are some of the companies that I think I saw about 1,050 respondents to the survey, so I'm assuming 1,050 companies, how are they handling the new age identity attack, account takeover protection type things, if you have any insights?
We didn't ask about identity access management. We asked about the different types of attacks that they are most concerned about. And it was just, what attacks are you most concerned about?
Thank you so much.
And I think that identity is a good question for next year, because we're seeing identity change, right? Because we're going from human identity, something we know, something we have, something we are, to machine identity, to also behavioral identity. And that's going to factor into things I think that we're going to see over the next year. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions about the report, I'm here. If you have any questions about Level Blue, we have our awesome Level Blue people up here as well. Thank you so much.